4:20 p.m. She had 18 minutes to make the drop before the server reset cycled at the headquarters of Pulse, the world's most addictive dating app, and erased her digital footprints. She wasn't hacking the code. She was sabotaging the business model. Maya adjusted the collar of her structured trench coat, the sharp lines of her silhouette cutting through the steam rising from the subway vents. The fabric, a rich, dark wool, was a shield against both the elements and the ubiquitous glow of screens. She moved with the predatory grace of someone who knew where the cameras were, her peripheral vision mapping the blind spots of the city's digital gaze. In her hand, she didn't hold a tablet or a phone, but a heavy, cream-colored envelope sealed with crimson wax. It felt ancient, almost sacred, against her palm. It was tangible, it was real, it was dangerous. "You're cutting it close, archivist." A voice rasped from the shadows of the loading dock, just a whisper above the hiss of rain. Maya didn't flinch. Her training, honed by years of navigating corporate espionage and late-night coding sessions, kept her movements economical. She turned, her sleek, straight hair whipping against her cheekbones like a curtain of black silk, catching the errant glint of a distant street lamp. "Punctuality is a virtue of the analog age, not the digital one," she replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline hammering against her ribs, a frantic rhythm against the steady tick of her watch. She extended the envelope. Inside lay the trajectory of 2 lives she had manually calculated to intersect, not based on algorithms, swipes, or geolocation data, but on the shared margin notes in used copies of 100 Years of Solitude and a mutual, almost visceral hatred for cilantro. These were the intricate, almost invisible threads of human connection, painstakingly observed and documented. The courier, a figure cloaked in a weather-beaten anorak, a hood pulled low over his face to obscure any identifiable features, snatched the letter with a practiced, almost violent efficiency. His hand brushed hers, cold and fleeting. "The board is getting suspicious. User retention is dropping in the beta sectors. People are actually staying together. That's bad for business, Maya." His voice held a note of genuine concern, a rare crack in his usual stoicism. He understood the stakes better than most. "Let them be suspicious," she said, turning on her heel, her high-fashion heels clicking a rhythmic staccato on the wet pavement, a defiant counterpoint to the drumming rain. "I'm not selling retention. I'm giving them a reason to delete the app." The irony was sharp, almost a physical taste in her mouth. She, the architect of their digital prison, was now the one offering escape. "If Marcus catches you," the courier warned, stepping back into the gloom, his voice barely audible above the city's symphony of sirens and rain, "he won't just fire you, he'll sue you into oblivion. You signed the NDA. You built the cage." He was referring not just to the legal document, but to the very architecture of Pulse itself, a system designed for perpetual engagement, a digital hamster wheel of fleeting connections. "I built the cage," Maya whispered to the rain, walking away, the words a silent vow. The weight of that responsibility, both the creation and the dismantling, settled heavily on her shoulders. A siren wailed 2 blocks over, a jagged tear in the fabric of the night. The city was watching. The algorithm was watching. But for tonight, the human heart was one step ahead. Tell us where you are watching from. Please subscribe, like, and share to support more stories like this. Maya sat in the glass-walled prison of her corner office, 40 stories above the street where she had played secret agent the night before. The nameplate on her desk read Maya Vane, lead architect, Pulse. To the world, she was the Cupid of the Silicon Age, the woman who had gamified romance for 300 million users, turning the messy, beautiful chaos of human connection into a predictable, profitable data stream. To herself, she was a fraud, a digital puppeteer pulling strings she no longer believed in. She stared at her reflection in the dark monitor of her computer, lean, athletic, impeccable. Her face, framed by severe obsidian hair, was a carefully constructed mask. She wore her success like armor, sharp blazers, severe lines, an aesthetic of cold perfection that kept the world at arm's length, protecting a vulnerability she rarely allowed herself to acknowledge. But at 28, having spent 8 years coding intimacy for strangers, refining algorithms designed to hook and hold, she had never felt the spark she sold. Her own dating life was a wasteland of polite, pointless encounters, each one a stark reminder of the emotional bankruptcy of the very system she had helped create. It kept people single. It offered the illusion of infinite choice, a shimmering carousel of potential partners that paralyzed the user, keeping them swiping, keeping them engaged, keeping them ad revenue profitable. A happy couple was a lost customer, a data point that had ceased to generate value. She had seen the initial vision, born from a desire to genuinely connect people, slowly corrode under the relentless pressure of quarterly reports and market demands. Her idealism had been chipped away, replaced by a cynical expertise in human psychology exploited for profit. She opened the drawer of her desk, bypassing the corporate tablet and the sleek voice-activated smart assistant to touch the cold metal keys of a vintage Royal Standard typewriter hidden beneath a false bottom. Its weighty, mechanical presence was a grounding force in her otherwise hyper-digital world. This was her sanctuary, her rebellion, her confession booth. The archivist. It had started as a hobby, a quiet act of defiance, matching friends who were burnt out on the app, who longed for something deeper than a profile picture and a curated bio. Then friends of friends. Now it was an underground movement for the romantic elite who were tired of being treated like data points, who sought the friction and complexity of real human connection. Each match was a tiny victory, a whispered revolution. A notification pinged on her encrypted laptop, the only digital tool she allowed in her analog operation, a necessary evil for secure communication. A new application. JK, architect, physical, not digital. I am tired of dating resumes. I want to date a person. Maya clicked the profile, a tremor of anticipation running through her. No photos were allowed in the archive until the first intake, a deliberate barrier against superficial judgments. But the writing style arrested her. It was precise, devoid of emojis or internet slang, structured with an elegance that suggested a man who thought before he spoke, who valued substance over superficiality. He didn't want a hookup. He wanted a foundation. He wanted to build something lasting, a concept that resonated deeply within her own disillusioned soul. OOPM, come alone. Thursday arrived with a torrential downpour, as if the heavens themselves were weeping for the state of modern romance. The Velveteen Rabbit was a speakeasy that smelled of old leather, pipe tobacco, and gin, a dimly lit haven where cell service went to die, a deliberate choice for the archivist's clandestine meetings. Maya sat in the back, shadowed by a plush velvet curtain, its deep crimson hue a stark contrast to the sterile blues and grays of her corporate life. She wore a high-collared black dress that accentuated the athletic taper of her shoulders, her makeup minimal but striking, her eyes sharp and assessing. She was assessing, not participating, a gatekeeper guarding a fragile, precious secret. Then he walked in. The air in the room seemed to shift, reorienting around him, a subtle but undeniable gravitational pull. Jin. He had to be Jin. He was South Korean, tall, with the kind of physique that suggested he built the skyscrapers he designed with his own hands. Broad shoulders, tapering into a waist that made his bespoke charcoal suit look like it was a second skin. He moved with a liquid, powerful grace, an innate confidence that wasn't arrogant, but simply was. His hair was styled back, sleek and severe, revealing a face that could have been carved from marble, high cheekbones, a strong jaw, and eyes that scanned the room with predatory intelligence, missing nothing. He checked his watch. An analog Patek Philippe, its understated elegance a silent declaration of taste and tradition. Maya's breath hitched, a tiny, involuntary gasp. The synchronicity was unsettling. He approached the booth, his gaze sweeping over her briefly before he slid in opposite her. He didn't pull out a phone. Instead, he placed his hands on the table, fingers long and devoid of rings, resting with an almost architectural precision. "You're the archivist?" he asked. His voice was a baritone rumble, smooth as the aged whiskey the bartender was pouring nearby, a sound that vibrated deep within her. "I am the gatekeeper," Maya lied, the words feeling like a betrayal even as she spoke them. She couldn't tell him she was the matchmaker. The archivist was a faceless entity, a concept, not a person. Maya was just the intake officer, a neutral conduit. "You can call me M." "M," he repeated, testing the weight of the letter on his tongue, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. "Short for mystery, I assume." "Short for make no mistake, I will reject your application if you lie to me," she countered, opening a leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with her grandfather's elegant script. She wasn't just hiding her identity, she was hiding her heart. "Why are you here, Mr. Kim?" Jin leaned back, the dim light catching the sharp angle of his jaw, highlighting the intensity in his dark eyes. "Because modern romance is a transaction. I swipe right, I buy dinner, I receive conversation that has been copy-pasted from a Twitter thread, a curated performance designed to impress, not to connect. I build buildings that are designed to stand for 100 years, structures that defy time and gravity. I want a relationship that lasts longer than a software update." His words, precise and cutting, were an indictment of her life's work. Maya froze. The irony was a physical blow, a cold knot in her stomach. She was the architect of the software updates he despised, the creator of the very system that churned out dating resumes. "And what makes you think you deserve that?" she asked, her voice tighter than she intended, a subtle tremor betraying her carefully constructed composure. "Because I am willing to do the work," Jin said, locking eyes with her. The intensity of his gaze was unsettling. It wasn't the hungry, superficial look of the men on her app. It was the curious, analytical look of a man solving a complex puzzle, seeing through her carefully constructed facade. "I don't want easy, I want real." For the next hour, Maya forgot to take notes. They argued about jazz versus classical, the merit of brutalist architecture versus organic design, and whether it was better to read a book or live it. She watched his hands as he spoke, the way passion animated his stoic features, the subtle shifts in his expression that hinted at a rich inner world. He was everything the algorithm couldn't capture. He was friction, he was depth, he was a challenge, and she found herself utterly captivated. By the time he left, leaving a scent of sandalwood and rain lingering in the booth, a potent mixture that clung to her, Maya knew two things with terrifying certainty. First, he was the perfect match for client 402, a cellist in Vienna who wrote poetry in the margins of her sheet music. Second, she didn't want to send him to Vienna. The thought of him with anyone else, even a perfectly curated match, felt like a betrayal of something nascent and precious within herself. The weeks that followed were a blur of double agency, a precarious dance on the edge of discovery. By day, Maya stood in gleaming boardrooms, presenting quarterly projections for Pulse, using buzzwords like engagement optimization and dopamine looping with practiced ease. She wore her couture suits like armor, her face a mask of corporate efficiency, her mind a fortress against the encroaching guilt. But beneath the surface, she was unraveling, the carefully compartmentalized worlds beginning to bleed into one another. She continued the intake sessions with Jin. They met in museums, in parks, in libraries, places where history and thought endured, where the digital world faded into background noise. Ostensibly, she was building his profile for the archivist, meticulously gathering details of his preferences, his dreams, his unique human quirks. In reality, she was falling in love with a man who would hate her if he knew her true identity, a man whose disdain for her professional life was a constant, unspoken barrier between them. Each shared laugh, each intense debate, each lingering glance was a step deeper into a deception that felt increasingly unsustainable. It was a Tuesday in October when the friction point arrived, sharp and unavoidable. They were walking through a sculpture garden, the autumn leaves crunching underfoot like brittle secrets. Jin had stopped wearing ties when he met her. His top button was undone, exposing the strong column of his throat, a subtle softening of his severe elegance. He looked at her, not at the art, his gaze warm and direct, an intimacy that thrilled and terrified her. "The archivist is taking a long time to find my match," Jin said softly, stopping by a bronze statue of Icarus falling from the sky, its tragic beauty mirroring the precariousness of her situation. Or perhaps the intake officer is stalling. There was a knowing glint in his eyes, a playful accusation that made her heart hammer against her ribs. Maya's breath hitched. "Perfection takes time, Jin." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. "I'm not looking for perfection anymore," he said, stepping into her space, closing the distance between them. The heat radiating from him was palpable, a magnetic pull she could no longer resist. "I think I'm looking at the person I want." His voice dropped to a whisper, a promise whispered only to her. Maya pulled back, the guilt rising like acid in her throat, burning with the intensity of 1,000 unsaid truths. "I can't. It's against protocol." The words were weak, a flimsy shield against the tidal wave of her feelings. "Screw the protocol," Jin said. His voice dropped even lower, raw with an emotion that mirrored her own. He reached out, his hand hovering near her waist, respectful but magnetic, a silent invitation. Before she could answer, before she could confess or flee, the vibration of her phone, which she had stupidly left in her coat pocket rather than securely tucked away in her bag, shattered the moment. She ignored it, willing it to silence, but it vibrated again and again, a frantic, insistent buzz that screamed urgency. "You should get that," Jin said, his eyes narrowing slightly, the warmth in them dimming, replaced by a flicker of suspicion. "It seems urgent." Maya pulled the phone out, intending to silence it, to make the intrusive digital world disappear. But the screen lit up with an override alert. It wasn't a text. It was a system-wide breach notification, stark red letters against a black background. "Unauthorized user access detected in Archive Node 4. Internal IP. Maya Vane." She gasped, her thumbs slipping on the slick glass. The screen rotated, the alert filling the display. Jin looked down. Maya Vane, lead architect. The pieces clicked into place with brutal, undeniable clarity. The silence that followed was louder than the city traffic outside, louder than the rustling leaves, louder than the beating of her own terrified heart. It was the sound of a foundation cracking, of a carefully constructed world crumbling into dust. Jin took a step back, the movement small but devastating. His face, usually so warm and expressive when he looked at her, hardened into the chiseled, impenetrable mask of a stranger. He looked at the phone, then at her eyes, his gaze searching, then utterly desolate. "You work for them?" he stated. It wasn't a question, but a pronouncement, a verdict. "I built it," Maya whispered, the confession tasting like ash and broken dreams. Jin laughed, a short, sharp sound devoid of humor, a bitter bark of disbelief. "You built Pulse? The app that turned dating into a slot machine? A factory for loneliness and fleeting gratification? And here you are, pretending to run some noble analog resistance, some underground movement for true love?" He gestured between them, his movement sharp, cutting the air, severing their connection. "So was this just market research? Was I a focus group? Were you A/B testing my emotional responses, my vulnerability, to optimize your next algorithm?" His voice was laced with a profound sense of betrayal, a violation of trust that went deeper than any lie. "No," Maya stepped forward, reaching for his arm, but he recoiled as if burned, his body language a wall between them. "Jin, listen. The archivist is real. It's my penance. It's my way of fixing what I broke. I hate the app as much as you do. More." "You don't get to hate the machine you feed, Maya," Jin said, his voice cold, devoid of the warmth that had so recently enveloped her. You profit from the loneliness of millions. You built the cage. And you used me, my genuine search for connection, to make yourself feel better about it. His words were precise, surgical, each one cutting deeper than the last. I fell for you, she pleaded, her composure fracturing, tears stinging her eyes. That wasn't part of the code. That wasn't an algorithm. Maybe, Jin said, buttoning his jacket with mechanical precision, his movements stiff and deliberate, as if re-erecting his own emotional defenses. Or maybe you just wanted to see if your algorithm could simulate love, too. If you could engineer a real connection just to prove you still could. He didn't wait for her answer. He turned and walked away. He didn't look back. Maya stood alone in the sculpture garden, surrounded by cold, bronze statues of fallen heroes and mythological figures, holding a phone that was buzzing with the destruction of her career and, more importantly, the destruction of her heart. The rain began to fall again, cold and unforgiving. She returned to Pulse HQ an hour later, not to beg for forgiveness, but to face the firing squad. The rain had plastered her hair to her face, her expensive trench coat was soaked, and her high heels squelched with every step. But when she swiped her badge, the turnstile didn't lock. It flashed green, an eerie welcome. She took the elevator to the 40th floor. The office, usually a hive of activity even at this late hour, was eerily quiet, the only sound the soft hum of servers. She walked to her glass-walled office, but the door was open, a foreboding invitation. Marcus Thorne, the CEO, was sitting at her desk, his expensive Italian suit looking oddly out of place in the casual tech environment. He was a man who wore sneakers with suits and viewed human emotion as a latency issue, a bug to be patched or monetized. On the desk, next to her sleek, silent monitor, sat her vintage typewriter. It had been smashed. Its elegant brass frame was twisted, the keys were scattered across the floor like broken teeth, a grotesque mockery of her analog sanctuary. "We found your little side project, Maya," Marcus said without looking up from her laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard, accessing her private files. His voice was calm, almost bored, a chilling contrast to the scene of devastation. Using company resources to run a competitor service? That's intellectual property theft. We own the data. We own the matches. And surprisingly, your archivist algorithm has a higher success rate than Pulse. He looked up then, a thin, predatory smile spreading across his face. Maya stood in the doorway, her hands balled into fists, her body vibrating with a controlled fury. It's not an algorithm, Marcus. It's empathy. It's human connection, painstakingly observed and facilitated. It's a feature, Marcus corrected, his smile widening, a glint of avarice in his eyes. And we're integrating it. Effective immediately, the archive is property of Pulse. We'll monetize the premium analog experience. Tiered pricing for true love? Genius, really. You just handed us the next billion-dollar idea, Maya. He leaned back, a smug satisfaction radiating from him. You can't, Maya said, horror dawning on her, a cold dread seizing her heart. It relies on human intuition, on nuance, on subjective experience. You can't code it. You'll destroy it. Watch me, Marcus smiled, a chilling promise. Oh, and you're fired. Effective immediately, security will escort you out. If you speak to the press or to Mr. Kim again, we release your browsing history, your private devlogs, every compromising detail we can find. We'll ruin you. Professionally, personally, you'll be a pariah. 2 security guards, hulking figures in dark uniforms, stepped out from the shadows near the door, their faces impassive. Maya looked at the broken typewriter, its shattered keys a testament to Marcus's brutality. She looked at the city skyline beyond the glass, a cold, indifferent sprawl of light and concrete. She had lost Jin. She had lost her creation, her one hope for redemption. She had nothing. She hadn't just built the front end. She had built the kill switch, a back door, a failsafe, a final act of defiance against the corporate machine she now loathed. "I'll pack my things," Maya said, her voice deceptively calm, a quiet hum of steel beneath the surface. "Make it quick," Marcus muttered, already typing on her keyboard, oblivious to the storm brewing. Maya walked to the server rack in the corner of her office, a local backup node she had insisted on keeping for latency testing, a perfectly plausible excuse to maintain a direct, physical link to the Pulse network. She opened her purse. She didn't take out a lipstick. She took out a powerful, industrial-grade magnet she used for degaussing hard drives in emergencies, a tool of absolute digital destruction. She looked at Marcus, her eyes blazing with a fierce, cold resolve. "You want the archive? You can have the ashes." She slammed the magnet against the server tower, a sharp, resonant thud that echoed in the silent office. The hum of the room spiked to a shriek, a cacophony of failing electronics. Sparks showered from the rack, a brilliant, dangerous cascade. Marcus shouted, leaping from the chair, but the domino effect had already begun. The local node was hard-linked to the main server farm in the basement, designed for seamless data synchronization. The surge traveled down the fiber optics faster than a thought, a digital wildfire consuming everything in its path. Screens across the floor flickered and died, plunging sections of the office into sudden darkness. The lights surged and blew out with sharp pops, emergency red lighting bathing the office in a hellish, apocalyptic glow. Alarms began to wail, a mournful cry of digital death. "What did you do?" Marcus screamed, scrambling over the desk, his face contorted in a mask of pure panic. "I initiated a hard reset," Maya said, dropping the magnet, its work done. Her voice was calm, almost serene amidst the chaos. "No user data, no matches, no retention algorithms, no curated profiles. Pulse is dead. Everyone starts from zero." She had not only destroyed the archive, she had annihilated the entire Pulse network, wiping its memory clean. The security guards grabbed her, hauling her back, but Maya didn't fight. She was smiling, a slow, triumphant curve of her lips. She was escorted out of the building into the pouring rain, jobless, likely facing a monumental lawsuit, and entirely free. She stood on the sidewalk, the icy water soaking her couture blouse, ruining her shoes, plastering her hair to her face. She took a deep breath, the air tasting of ozone and wet pavement, a raw, elemental scent of new beginnings. The alarms of Pulse HQ wailed behind her, a funeral dirge for a digital empire. A black car idled at the curb, its headlights cutting through the rain. The window rolled down, slowly, deliberately. Jin sat in the driver's seat. He looked tired, lines of exhaustion etched around his eyes. He looked furious, a tight knot of anger still visible on his jaw. But he was there. "Get in," he said, his voice clipped, devoid of emotion, yet unmistakably an invitation. Maya hesitated, the reality of what she had done settling in. "I destroyed it, all of it, the app, the archive, everything." "I heard," Jin said, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, refusing to meet hers. "The news is already breaking. Pulse is down globally. 300 million people just lost their matches, their carefully constructed digital personas." "I had to," she said, water dripping from her nose, mingling with the last vestiges of her tears. He was going to monetize real connection. He was going to turn empathy into a tiered subscription. "Get in, Maya," he repeated, softer this time, a hint of something unreadable in his tone. She opened the door and slid into the leather seat, the warmth of the car enveloping her, a stark contrast to the cold, wet world outside. Jin didn't drive away immediately. He turned to look at her, truly look at her. He took in her soaked clothes, her ruined hair, the fierce, defiant set of her jaw, the lingering tremor in her hands. "You really burned it down," he said, a note of awe, almost grudging admiration in his voice. "I told you," Maya said, shivering slightly, her gaze unwavering. "I'm not the machine. I'm the glitch." Jin reached into the back seat and pulled out a soft plush towel. He handed it to her, his fingers brushing hers, a spark passing between them, tentative but undeniable. The archivist matched me with a woman who values permanence, he said, his voice low, almost a confession. A woman who would risk everything for something real. I thought she was a liar. She was, Maya said, wiping her face, the warmth of the towel a small comfort. But she's not anymore. The lie, the fraud, was gone, washed away by the rain and the fire she had unleashed. Jen looked at his analog watch, its brass gleam reflecting the faint dashboard lights. Then he reached out and took her hand, his grip warm, solid, and undeniable. It wasn't a digital connection, but a physical one, grounding and real. So, he said, putting the car in gear, the engine purring to life. Since the app is down, and I have no way to swipe, no algorithm to guide me, I suppose I have to ask you to dinner myself. Maya looked at their joined hands, a tentative smile finally breaking through. I know a place, she said. No cell service, terrible lighting, smells of old books and gin. Sounds perfect, Jin replied. And for the first time since their meeting, his eyes held a hint of a genuine smile, a warmth that promised a future. As they drove away from the chaos of the tech district, the neon signs of Pulse HQ flickered one last time and went dark, leaving only the steady, unyielding light of the street lamps to guide them home. The city, momentarily stripped of its digital facade, felt more real, more human. Disconnection. The algorithm was broken. The us was just beginning. Life isn't about the perfect match. It's about the person who is willing to break the system to find you. In a digital world, be the glitch. Be the friction. Be the one who stays when the server goes down.